Yes, sir.
I want to say one remark for the benefit of the viewer to know how that. We never rehearsed what we are going to say. It's all spontaneous and organized chaos, if you want. But it is really mirroring how our brain work and how the history of science is. It's not straight line, it's a fractal and a jump and all that. So I hope that the viewer will appreciate the fact that really we are talking without preparing at all, and the only control we act on these things we are saying is the truth, nothing else.
That's the motivation. And of course, there's a little organization in terms of reading titles and abstracts, but that's absolutely true. We're just kind of we're going for it.
But even that we didn't agree upon it, except right now.
Well,
we just said that that's a good idea.
What do we agree on? Come on now, I'm just kidding. This is a really important one. It certainly is for me because the subject of this, Lucian Hardy, is a very, very nice man. And I met him not that long ago at the Science of Consciousness conference put on by Stuart Hameroff and Sir Roger Penrose, particularly related to their work with they call it the ORC theory, but the key thing is with the microtubules in the various, not just neurons, but cells. And microtubules have 13 filaments, 8 spiraling one way, 5 the other, which you have all these Fibonacci relationships, which means you have golden ratios, approximations galore, and at the tips of the microtubules that they're taken to be the quantum computers are in fact clathrons, and clathrons are buckyballs. You take an edge of in other words, a truncated icosahedron, you take an edge of it if that's one, you go across the other side. It's exactly 3 large golden ratios, 3 versions of the greater. So it looks like what they're talking about with consciousness at the synaptic cleft is it's resonance with golden ratios galore. And you double a microtubule, I'm getting off a little tangent here, but you double it, you don't go 13, make it 26, it becomes the next Fibonacci number. It goes to 21. And so there's a resonance going on, and that's behind Penrose and Hameroff, and Lucian Hardy comes to this conference. I get a chance to interview him. And as you pointed out, it was really Lucian Hardy who discovered that entanglement, at least with these, I believe, 2 particles, you've got the golden ratio to the 3rd power.
No,
to the 5th power. And we're talking about the golden ratio is the lesser now, the 0.618 taken to its 5th power. So here's the title of the paper, Resolution of Hardy's Paradox Within Space-Time Physics and the Ithaca Interpretation of Quantum Mechanics. By religiously adhering to physics in space-time and taking the final verdict of Merman's Ithaca interpretation of quantum mechanics seriously, Hardy's paradox is completely resolved. It is then concluded that logical and mathematically consistent physical theories must be put in space-time related formalism, such as non-commutative geometry and E-infinity theory, to avoid quantum paradoxes. At a minimum, we should employ the philosophy behind consistent quantum interpretation, such as that of the famous Ithaca interpretation of D. Merman. So here's a couple things from the introduction I think are important. The present paper is devoted to resolving Hardy's famous paradox, which gave the precious jewel of quantum gravity, namely Hardy's probability of quantum entanglement of 2 quantum particles. The probability equals phi to the 5th power, where phi equals square root of 5 minus 1 divided by 2. The paper was also written after undergoing a basic evolution in the mind of the author, Mohamed Naschie, which made him extend his old belief that at a very deep level, physics and mathematics are two sides of the same coin, brought to a new level, convincing him that when devising thought experiments for fundamental mathematical theories, then philosophy and physics must be recalled to help mathematics from falling into the trap of paradoxes. More often than not, these traps are naturally encoded into our language, which we use not only to communicate what we want to say to others, but is fundamental to our own thinking when we're talking to ourselves silently, that is, thinking. It is in this context that we have to recall Wittgenstein's critique of language and the connection between mental pictures, physics, and language, which he wrote in the form of mostly aphorisms and published in his classic Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. In the present work, we will apply some of Wittgenstein's views to the superb paper, namely the Ithaca interpretation of quantum mechanics by the eminent researcher and gifted educator N.D. Merman, and conclude that putting Hardy's paradox in E-infinity spacetime and Kahn's non-commutative geometry, it ceases to be a paradox and harmonizes immediately with Merman's conclusion and what we perceive as being reality. This is in essence what we will try to show in the following sections, and slightly more, under the title Hardy's Paradox, the Golden Mean and Merman's Resolution of the Problem. Following Merman's explanation and using his notation, we consider Lucian Hardy's beautiful Gedanken experiment, which incidentally was confirmed experimentally as far as quantum entanglement probability of phi to the fifth power, and found to be in excellent agreement with the theoretical results.
Yes, there's no doubt that I knew about Hardy's work from the book of Penrose, The Road to Reality. Mm-hmm. For me, it was the road to complete understanding of my own theory. Most of the time, our theories are far cleverer than us, mm-hmm. because mm-hmm. we gone through so many iterations and so many mistakes until we arrive to complete theory, and then we think, really, we done it. God knows really who done it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Maybe God. Mm-hmm. So when I knew that about Hardy, I start. It's the simplest thing. Two quantum particles to become entangled, mm-hmm. in the ordinary meaning of quantum entanglement. Quantum entanglement is such an unpleasant thing to any realist that it made Schrödinger and Einstein hate quantum mechanics, and I think Schrödinger was saying something to the effect that if I knew it will end with this quantum jump, every time I want to catch the wave, I find a particle, mm-hmm. then I'd rather be a Schuster and not to be a physicist. I got into that. I said, let me drive it as a pre-quantum, not a boson, not a fermion, mm-hmm. and see if the result will hold. Mm-hmm. Just through my theory, through contour set, mm-hmm. contour point. And I done that. There are some people who have this horrible misconception that this is Hardy's result only apply to bosons and not to fermion. I have done it for neither boson nor fermion, but something which is Brie or this distinction. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. A quantum particle, I would say it now. Mm-hmm. How they got entangled. So I got 5 to the power of 5. And it was very near to what Hardy is saying, but Hardy didn't. You see, Hardy was, I knew about him because he's a friend of Garnet Ward, mm-hmm. and he worked, they're both working at the Parameter Institute. Mm-hmm. I knew he's a very pleasant, nice, modest, and quiet person. So he didn't mention the golden mean. Also, in the book of Penrose, he made even a simpler version of Hardy's Gedanken experiment. Gedanken means thought, thought experiment. It's taken from the German, like eigenvalue, you know. So I was not talking about the golden mean. I get the golden mean to the power of 5, and it's very near. So I done exactly what Hardy have done, using the machinery and notation, which Garnet said it's very important. Notation are not simply notation. Notation is very important, which is right. Notation is a language. So I used the Dirac, Bra, and Kit procedure. Not Schrödinger equation, not anything else. I just followed Dirac. And I got 5 to the power of 5. Because I never approximate anything. Although I am the engineer, approximation is in our character.
Sure.
For all practical reason, I can hug a girl. It doesn't need to take a measurement and see how far she is from me.
But isn't that the problem with Hardy, is he rounded it off? And that you and Penrose and others didn't recognize, at least initially.
Yeah,
Perhaps.
but when I done it,
Yeah,
it
you
was
got
a golden
the
mean.
precise, yes.
The golden mean. I was so over the moon. I would say to Sir Roger Penrose, the great ceremonial, I know something you don't know, although you should know, because Roger is a master of the golden mean and his golden mean tiling.
Yeah.
He knew he must have all this kite and I don't know what the kit, and so they have certain name for it. To tile the bathroom,
Right.
you have to cut it in golden mean, otherwise you end in chaos. But then, the teacher of all teachers, David Merman, who is the teacher of my friend Mitchell Feigenbaum, he published that 5 years ago. He recognized in an educational journal to teach people, and really he made the work of Lucien Hardy, which is ingenious, accessible to anybody. And he said, and this is the golden mean, and why is the golden mean, and so on. He discussed it. So I was delighted, but a bit disappointed.
Sure,
I wanted to be the first. I wasn't. But then here comes something else. You know, there's something called Hardy paradox, which is not his result. Because through this whole story, and I'm cutting a very long story short, there's many solutions which are meaningless, which come out of this calculation. And where are the solutions? And the solutions are spurious. They are not spurious. They are not correct. And that's why it make, if he is right, then this something is wrong. If this is wrong, then this something is right. And so the whole thing come to a paradox. And it was christened Hardy's paradox. There is many versions for Hardy's paradox. I didn't know that, by the way. I know that from an Israeli friend, Sofia Vexel. Sofia Vexel is an Israeli, very, very nice lady who knew all the famous scientists. And she contacted me from Israel. We never met, but through the internet. You meet people you never met. And she hates noise. So I told her, then you have to immigrate from the Middle East if you don't want to have noise, because her neighbors are very noisy and she can't work. She worked on Hardy's paradox. She worked almost all her life on Hardy's paradox. And I told her I solved it. So I sent it to her, and she said to me, no, this is another version of Hardy's paradox. So I couldn't help her here. I published for her some paper in the past. In any case, Sofia worked in the Technichon. Technichon is the more engineering excellence to counterpart the scientific excellence of Weizmann Institute. It's Technichon. And Technichon was established by one of my dearest friends, Israeli friend. He since died, Yusuf Singer. And we spent delightful time in Prague together. And we visited the Prague Opera. And we have seen something for Smetana, an opera by Smetana. Any case, I realized then that David Merman again have made an interpretation for quantum mechanics where Hardy's paradox disappeared. And the essence of it was really what I done. I had no paradox. I got only Hardy's result and no other extra results. But I didn't follow the orthodox quantum mechanics. I followed my approach, E infinity. But he said, and I interpreted what he said like this. You're talking about Gedanken experiment. Can you tell me, even if you are Prophet Noah or any other prophet, how can you think of any Gedanken experiment without space-time in your brain? If you make any Gedanken experiment, it has to be subjected to space-time. Now, orthodox quantum mechanics have no space-time. No wonder then you get solutions which are meaningless for a Gedanken experiment, which is really an arrangement in your head, and your head is space-time head. And when you do the analogy, you are using a theory which doesn't recognize at all that there is space-time. You see?
Gotcha.
At all. Here it is. I start always from Cantorian space-time. I can't think one thing except one thing, empty set. And very, very empty set is space-time. Empty set only is a quantum wave. Zero set is a particle. My whole thing starts by space-time, so I get no paradoxes. So it was very clear to me. I have the same philosophy, whether I knew it or not, like David. He said, put things first in space-time. Then you avoid paradoxes, and the paradoxes disappear. I have no other way of doing my calculation except starting by space-time. So I came in this paper to the conclusion that really it was, as you know, I mean, David Merman, a legendary professor of ethics. He was in Cornell, where I was also. But I was after he retired. I was in Cornell after that. And also after Feigenbaum escaped from there because the cuisine was not to the liking of somebody born and raised in New York.
So what I found interesting in my interview of Lucian Hardy was, and I know he was being honest about it. I'm just being frank, and I'm not trying to say anything negative, but it still seems that to this day, he does not realize what he stumbled upon. He doesn't realize the significance.
I think he is scared enough by what he's seeing around him, rightly so, to indulge into this thing and get himself into a room or an environment he doesn't really want. He is a peaceful person. He doesn't want to go fighting left and right. The head of the institution where he is.
Well, okay, but oddly, I know, we won't go there, but oddly enough, he loved my little golden section book, which I gave him a copy of.
Because he is a courteous person.
Well.
At the same time, no, he cannot say in your face something which is, but he is a courteous person in the sense he really believes what he say and he can say it to you, but he doesn't want to say it in such wide context where then people who hate you and hate me start hitting at him because he is not the guy. I mean, I respect that. If you are not a street fighter, don't go and pick a fight with somebody and have a broken knee, you see. The world of science is full with people who are street fighters. Because whether what I have done is right or wrong, there is no need to make a huge conspiracy and get a famous magazine to write a negative letter about me and pay even money for people who are, it's ridiculous.
Well,
But I forgive. I follow your advice. The best thing is to forget and forgive.